I'm going to compare case studies, naturalistic observations, and experiments to each other. In a case study, it started with doctors taking their patient's personal history to form a diagnosis. You can take real-life situations, and you can get an insight into individual's behavior and unique phenomena. You can take the behavior of a group or an individual by using qualitative or quantitative methods. For instance, qualitative methods would be feelings, emotions, etc. And the quantitative would be IQ tests or blood tests and stuff like that. You can focus on a limited aspect, and you can use things like personal artifacts, official documents, and interviews of the person. The pros of case studies are that you can have more detail and in-depth visions of your participant. You have different perspectives. You can see extraordinary behavior, things that you wouldn't be able to see in other experiments, and hence this can stimulate new research. Also, case studies may contradict already existing experiments. The cons of case studies are that they might not be that reliable, and also since they are about one individual and in-depth information about the one individual, they may not represent the general population. An example of a case study would be the one from Corkin in 1987, who investigated the relationship between brain damage and memory functioning. Case studies are usually made when there is something very interesting, unusual, or particularly revealing to investigate. Naturalistic observations have a no cause and effect relationship. They're observed in a natural setting, and the data collection is for visual, audio, or written things. The pros of this is that you can observe participants or animals in their natural habitat without manipulation. The habit cannot be created by the observer, so it's very natural, and hence it's also very credible. And you can study things that would be unethical if you reproduce them in a lab. The cons of naturalistic observations are that you cannot record everything you see, and also often the participants, if they know that they're being observed, they behave differently, also known as reactivity. Also, participants might want to try to guess the outcome. Oh, and there's also researcher bias that has to be avoided in naturalistic observations. Naturalistic observations are used especially when researching animals, and so they don't have the stress of being in a lab or something like that. For instance, when they're mating or bringing up their young. Then there are the normal experiments. There can be laboratory experiments, field experiments, and natural experiments. Field experiments happen in the natural habitat, and natural experiments are when you have a random sample and when the variables are not controlled. Experiments usually have, like I said before, variables. They have an aim, they have a hypothesis, and they're generally more controlled than the other methods of research. That's also the pro. They're very reliable, especially the laboratory experiments, and they're easy to replicate. The cons are that they are environmentally artificial, the laboratory experiments, and the participants might react differently if they're in a lab than if they're in the natural environment. That's where there are also field experiments, which have ecological validity, and the people and participants are in their natural environment. The cons of those are that you cannot control variables as easily, and generally an experiment cannot be controlled that easily. Another pro of experiments is that you can perform impossible experiments that would not be able to do without controlling other variables. An example of a field experiment would be the New York subway experiment, where they had a man with a cane and a man with an alcohol bottle collapse, and you had to see which person actually got helped and if people helped the person. Those were the three methods of research.